Welcome to a special episode of Top Lines and Tales, and as always we'd like to thank our sponsors Harbro, and we'd like to think this episode is quite unique there. I hope you enjoy it.
5 1/4, 5 1/2 on it, 550 on fine, gotta be 5 1/2, 5 1/2, so good for you, 525 on it, 525.
So this week we're doing a unique experience. This is me, Andy Fraser from Top Lines and Tales, live here in Denver, and I've got with me the guys from Angus One Podcast. I've got
Heath McPherson, Brock Boyle.
Isn't that fantastic? The three of us could get together in one podcast. We're going to put this out simultaneously, the three of us there. So, not quite sure where we start here. We've all got an interest in the history of Angus, and we've all got an association with Angus as well as other things within agriculture. Tell us a little bit more to start with, Heath, what you do at Angus One Promotions.
So I started Angus One as an online magazine back in about 2012, 2013. So my experience was that I was starting a herd of Angus cattle and working with some of pedigrees that I wanted to work with. I was having a hard time sourcing cattle. And what I found is that in my searches was that those cattle out there existed. They weren't non-existent. It was just that they were kind of underrepresented in media, in Angus Journal and some other publications there. And I think a good bit of that was the expense of the publication and whatnot. So at that stage, I thought that by eliminating overhead, by doing an online magazine was kind of the way to get started and to be able to keep things affordable and ease distribution, so that at that point in time I was by myself as far as doing the articles and putting together the graphic design and whatnot. And it just made it a lot more manageable. So a little bit after that, I had some life changes. We dropped the magazine there, and we kind of got away from it, I guess. So
and then because you and Brock, now we're fast forwarding 10 years now from that. So you and Brock have been together there. So how did the two of you guys get together?
So more or less, we got together on social media. We followed a lot of the same groups and contributed to a lot of the same groups. And I come across a bull that Brock had raised there, and at some point I had reached out to him, or he had reached out to me, and we started talking about the cattle that he had in his inventory. And I was working with a herd over in western Iowa and consulting there, and that herd is just a short distance away from where Brock is located. And I guess curiosity got the better of me. I called him up and went and viewed the herd there, and found out that we were like-minded and kindred spirits. And so that's kind of where it started. It started from the cattle. So I had contributed to quite a bit of the Angus groups on Facebook, and prior to that, I had been a member of or contributed to the Advantage Angus or Advantage Cattle forums. So I got started with Angus cattle in 1997. Prior to that, we were a commercial herd. My dad and I bought our first cattle in 97, actually off of a sale that Tom managed in North Carolina.
Okay.
And from there, I got involved with the North Carolina Angus Association, and then we started showing at the National Junior Angus Show and started showing around.
Okay. And when we say Tom, of course, it's Tom Burke. We'll go on to maybe our association, all of us, with Tom Burke. And Brock, you farm Angus in your own right, family farm. Whereabouts are you?
Yeah. I came from a commercial herd as well. I got to attend a few Angus sales and kind of just caught the bug and decided I needed to probably buy a few of my own and get started. And so I kind of started buying a few in 2008, kind of slowed it up there when I went to college in 2010 through spring of 15 there, and then came back from college and got a job locally so I could kind of still work with the cattle. And then from there went from about at that time maybe 15 purebred cows to well over 100 now. So It's been a lot of fun. And for me, I run an oldie emulation herd for the most part. So that's been interesting having two different gene pools to work from.
Okay. And we mentioned podcasts and said I run a podcast, you guys run a podcast. Slightly different in a way as a podcast, but all of us, I think, believe that the podcast is about recording the history of the breed and the history of the people in and around the breed there. But besides that, at Angus One, you said you do a lot of analysis around the sales. And tell us a little bit more about that, Heath.
So we picked up, it actually started, Brock managed his own sale, him and two other breeders. And it I don't know, it wasn't planned, but they were having their embryo and genetics sale where they were selling a few flushes and whatnot. And it just kind of clicked that, hey, we should probably talk about your sale and whatnot. So we talked about it for a week or two, and we were getting within, I don't know, it was probably the same week.
Yeah.
So we were getting within a week of the sale, and I reached out to Brock and his two partners in that sale, and I said, let's get together as soon as we can and record this thing, and we'll just go lot by lot and talk about the genetics, but more so the mindset behind the breeding programs, getting into the nuts and bolts of why they were making certain decisions and where they were headed with their programs and kind of where they were at in that progress. So we recorded that one, and to be quite honest, we had no prep whatsoever. We just winged it and
one take straight out the door.
Yeah, and it worked out extremely well.
Okay. And you've carried on doing that through various sales, just local sales or national sales? Do you do them all, or just cherry pick a few?
So mainly, we kind of we have a niche group of cattle that we follow, and I would say that's probably our niche group of listeners as well. We follow maternal influenced cattle or maternal oriented cattle. A lot of those are Western range type cattle. Although we did record with Ginger Hill Angus in Virginia, and that one is also, forage based. I would say more or less a low input kind of operation. So
okay, and we're here, as I said, at the Denver at the National Western Show. It's my first time. You said you've been here, quite a while ago. There, we're seeing the cattle in the show ring this morning, and the cattle from the sale ring to the show ring. We know there's almost an antagonism between the show cattle and how do you see it when you get here and look at the cattle in the show ring today compared to what you guys are used to producing and the sales that you go into?
It is a whole different world.
Yeah. For me, it's interesting because I kind of deal with more commercial type breeders and producers as well. So coming here and seeing these cattle that are just done to the nines is kind of interesting because you're trying to look through those things when you're trying to evaluate them for how you would see them in your herd. And for me, that's been a lot of fun. Just the whole experience here is my first time as well. And it's been an interesting experience just coming here and just seeing the amount of people. And there's a lot of excitement, I think, from top to bottom, and it's been a great exposure for me seeing some of these other breeds and getting exposed to the principles that other people are using in their herds, and that there's always something that you can learn from anybody and everybody. And here it's been a lot of fun just tapping into that network and kind of learning from those people, maybe the other realms that you wouldn't get a chance to on your own, because we're kind of by nature maybe pigeonholed ourselves a little bit, staying with the more maternal type folks, but at the same time, it's been fun kind of getting exposure out here to.
Let's rewind to your history a little bit. Both you said, you talking about club calves earlier on, 4-H maybe came up through that. So you've come to the cattle fit and the cattle dressing. You understand how all that gets put together and the difference some of these cattle look in the ring compared to they will do in a sale ring there. But do you see through that when you look at these cattle, or does it just hard to get past?
I'm evaluating them how they would look in a pasture, and how is that female or bull going to perform once they get outside of the show ring or the sale ring, is when they get out into the real world.
Okay.
How are they going to do?
Okay.
And for me, it's been a lot of fun kind of going through these cattle and seeing, okay, there's different characteristics. I'm a big believer in the Bonsmara principles, and so kind of trying to evaluate these cattle through the Bonsmara lens has been a lot of fun.
We talked a little bit over lunch about the Bonsmara. Just give us a little bit more, Heath, about how the Bonsmara principle works. I mean, I've mentioned it before on our podcast there, but just take us maybe back to the roots on how that philosophy comes together.
Sure. Jan Bonsmara was a South African animal scientist, and he studied basically the hormonal effects on conformation, on composition. And so basically he noted that there were certain characteristics in cattle that were fertile versus subfertile. There's a lot of those different characteristics. The brisket pleat, the ewe-neck, the high shoulder, high scapula rotation, long tail switch. But essentially, those are, I see them more as a measure of balance with the environment. Basically, if an animal is well adapted for their environment, they're going to exhibit those traits. Sure. And it's not necessarily that we're looking for specific measurements so much as we're looking for those characteristics.
Now, how did he come about, Jan Bonsmara? How did he come about this? I mean, you look at the cattle. We can all look at. Did he get a whole lot of data and calculations on this, or did he kind of looking to see that the best cattle have got those traits?
Well, I mean, he would have built up a good bit of data on those before he would have ever went on a speaking circuit or anything like that. He would have been in the lab, measuring those effects. Part of my introduction to Bonsmara was a gentleman by the name of Gerald Fry, and he kind of had his own brand of it. But he had explained to me the principles, and that coincided with a time when I was at Iowa State University as a student there in my undergrad animal science, and I was taking a reproduction lab, and Dr. Anderson there would have us evaluate. He had bred mice there, mice and rats and whatnot, and he had done different treatments with certain hormones or certain metabolites and that sort of thing, and that was really where it clicked for me, being able to see those differences in another species. Basically, we would actually. He would inject those. He would do those treatments, and then he would euthanize those animals, and we were actually dissecting them, so you could see inside and outside what the different characteristics was, the different effects by those particular hormones.
And some of it even comes down to the swirl of the hair on the head. Is that right? We just look at an animal, and does that work? I mean, some people might.
I don't get so much into the whorls as much as like things like hair shedding. The thickness of the hide, which you can tell in the neck wrinkles. Basically the shine of the coat would show adrenal function there.
And does this transfer into monetary terms?
It is if your customer base is selecting for those traits. But as far as is there any sort of premium out there? There wouldn't be unless you were marketing
that type of cattle.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on a little bit. And we chatted over lunch about history. I mean, you guys got a history in there. We're all interested in the history, where the breed came from, and it's kind of where I come in there a little bit. And I mean, you've studied a lot of the history of the cattle in the USA and the cattle in the UK as well with that. And that's both of you, I think, have a passion for the history, don't you, bro?
Correct. Bottom line is those are always your roots, and then figuring out, where we came to where we are, and there's always something to learn from the history. And for me, it's always been kind of neat to go back and see maybe even people that are gone and try and pick up anything from a Larry Linhart, any of his writings or principles and teachings is always fascinating to me, to try and tap into that brain and try and see through the lens of how they saw their cattle.
Sure, and you're the same, Heath. We were talking over lunch. We've been bidding for the same books online. There's some of these history books there. We can learn from history, can't we?
Yeah, yep. And so, I mean, I feel like it's built into a little bit my mindset. Even from a young age, I've had a fascination for any type of history. Really, before I would be considered a cattle expert, I was probably a baseball expert because I collected baseball cards, and it wasn't just about collecting cards. It was about knowing everything about baseball. The same with cattle. When I got into that, I was always the kid that. I would wear out a copy of the Angus Journal, or I'd go into a pedigree database and I would look through so many pedigrees that I'd get locked out. So
it's been said to me, because we'll come on to the way I've been involved in the history just now, but it's been said to me that maybe in America, compared to some of the other parts of the world, they're maybe not quite so interested in the history of the cattle. To them, the cattle is all about taking the cattle forward rather than seeing where they've come from. Would it be a true statement in that? That not maybe everybody in the US is maybe interested in history?
In a lot of ways, yes. But I think the more that we do this, the more we find that there is an appreciation for that history. I had the opportunity to go to Wye Plantation or Wye Angus last January, and it was a group of breeders that were enthusiastic about Wye that got together, and in the conversations there, my takeaway from that was what has fueled the surrounding around Wye has been that they're so well documented, that there's history there. They have Jim Lingle wrote a book toward the end of his career there, A Breed of Noble Bloods, where he described cattle in a way that people don't describe cattle today. He would go into the very characteristics there of how one was put together, what he liked about them, and that's very much translated over to what we try to do on the podcast. We're trying to describe cattle in a way that people can generate an accurate picture of that animal without physically being there and seeing that animal. And also he talked about his methodology for breeding, and I find that aside from the book is a wonderful resource, but there's tons more information beyond that. Jeff Bricker, that is the current manager there, has started a project of digitizing a lot of those photos of the cattle at Wye, and then sharing those on social media. And I think those are so valuable in being able to see how those animals are put together, and then start to kind of put together a context of where that program was at that point in time. And, I feel like it's given me insight onto where the limitations are in that program and how to utilize those cattle a little better. So we're certainly trying to take that on a larger scale beyond, the Wye program and get into what are the nuts and bolts of J. Bob Poole, or what are the nuts and bolts of Jason Enenberg or Rook Miller that we've interviewed in the past. So
Wye is an interesting yardstick, really, I think, because very much a man before his time, man who looked into the future, I think, and saw where the breed needed to go and reverse the trend, what everybody else was doing. And there are still people out there now, and there's certainly in the UK, the likes of young William McLaren and that, who are seeing where the breed needs to be in 10 years' time and looking at those. And we see those people, but again, they learn from that history, don't they, bro?
Mm-hmm. And I think the unsung hero of Wye was really Arthur Hooton, because he was the guy that gave Lingle the stability to be able to do what he did.
He had a hell of a trust in him, really, didn't he?
Absolutely.
He knew very little of cattle, I think, himself, did he? He took Jim on that journey. Yeah. No, that's great. And I say we're here at the Denver show, and I'm here for a slightly different reason, because I'm here promoting the Angus history book that we've written, and you guys have got a copy of it now. Thank you very much, and you've had a look at that, and you can. I'll let you're the podcast. You fire quite a few questions at me just to.
Sure thing. Just to turn things back around. What got you started in podcasting? What got you interested in livestock history and Angus history?
I've always had cattle all my days, always been involved in cattle, and I think as got older, remembering all the old stories and things that we had, and one day lost one of our friends just quite suddenly, and then another one, the guys that my go-to guys that knew everything about the breed, and they knew everything there was to know, and then they suddenly dropped dead for reasons, and I realized a lot of these stories are getting lost, and my total reason for starting the podcast was to try and capture some of the history of those older guys, some of the stories and the tales of those older guys, maybe not just the history that they had, that we could all enjoy, really. And once they're recorded there on digital, they're there forever. And I think that I've moved away from that a little bit by trying to keep the podcast varied by talking to people in different parts of the world and different ages as well. But still, my mainstay is really to make sure that we don't let those old stories die anymore.
How did the collaboration between you and Bob and Tom come together?
So the Bob and Tom thing, I'd interviewed Bob because interesting guy, and I knew of Tom Burke, so Bob was my conduit to Tom, really, to chat to those guys, because Tom's another, a great historian, got all that knowledge in there, and to chat to those guys on a podcast and bring them in was essential, really, to catch those, and a few others that they introduced me to. And then Bob had written The History of the Shorthorn, a great book that he'd written, The History of the Shorthorn breed in the USA, and Bob had taken it, or Tom had seen this book, and Tom had said to Bob, you really should write one of those on the Angus. And it was just around about that time that Bob and I got together, and I'd already done some work on the history of the Angus in the UK, so it was a natural collaboration that if we're going to do the history of the Angus in the USA, let's bring the UK and the rest of the world into it as well. So it went from just being the history of the Angus in the USA to the history of the Angus throughout the world, and I think that's been that's what's made the book very rounded and interesting to a lot of people. And we've sold the book into 23 different countries now, a lot of those non-English speaking, but still interested in the history. And you realise there are a lot of people out there that want to know where the breed has come from.
Is there a certain section of the book or a certain story that really stood out to you as something that was truly neat and really took you by surprise that was what happened?
I think the roller coaster of the history of the breed, and you guys will know this, and the listeners will know that as well, the roller coaster of the breed. Back the turn of the last century, the turn of the 20th century, Angus bulls were up there near a ton in weight, and then as we got through the demands from South America and Americas as well, for that matter, taking the animals smaller and smaller until we got to an animal that's going to produce corned beef in a feedlot, and the animals got so small and the fad got so far that they fell out of favour, and then the roller coaster trying to get the cattle back up again to that size that they needed to, and that extreme size that Canadians brought in, and it shows itself very, very quickly. If you look at a graph of the size of the animals within the book, they went from extreme small to extreme huge, and then back down again. And I think that the clever guys that were in there, and they're both in the US, and talk Jim Lingle just now, and a lot of guys in the US, a lot of guys in the UK, who, when the breed was out of favour, they decided that they were going to make it their mission to get that breed back on its feet again. And we see that roller coaster, and we see it turning and twisting and turning all the way. But I think there's no one story. It's just it's the whole collaboration of people through 4 or 5 generations that have taken that breed through its ups and its downs to back where it is now, to the number one breed in the world.
Yeah, speaking of ups and downs, how was the process of putting together a book with 2 other guides?
It was brilliant, actually. I mean, Bob's the guy with the history in there, and Bob was sort of driving this, and we brought Tom in for his knowledge, and Bob would bounce off me and I'd bounce off him. We had different styles of writing. Bob goes a bit more into the detail, Tom maybe not quite so much detail. We had to sort of balance that, and then my side of it, looking at the history of the breed through its home in Perth in Scotland, and the heydays of the bulls coming through Perth, and all the histories there, and the guys that I'd had personal contact with was fantastic, and balancing that with what Tom had done over here in different time zones and different styles. It was a challenge. It was a fantastic challenge, but I think we all relished it. And Bob said just now, we might be catch a word with him in a minute, but Bob's been on my podcast quite a few times. I think you guys would like to get him on your Angus One podcast, because Bob is just a mine of information, and Bob goes into detail. He goes into detail. He's got a lot of that.
Yeah. I think Bob, the first podcast that you did with Bob, I think that's what introduced me to your podcast as well.
No, certainly an interesting guy, and I said, Tom as well. And Tom's the most unbelievable man. I mean, he'll probably say that himself if you ask him, but he's an unbelievable man. Still flies 300 flights a year. And I was sitting with him just now watching the Angus heifer classes going through and chatting away. And he just turned around and talked to random people and said, "Hello, how are you? Where are you from?" He's a people person. He really is a people person, as well as that knowledge in there. And he's just an amazing man that I think of our generation, it's a privilege to know people like that.
Very much so. And a guy like Tom is certainly one of our motivations of doing what we do with Angus One is trying to do our best to capture that knowledge. Again, I think we're very alike in our missions there. But.
Yeah, and Angus One, you looking to do some more on that history side of it? I know you said you picked up the copy of that, but is that something that you're looking to do within Angus One, is to put some more of the podcast out, looking back into the depth of history as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably my strong suit, and then Brock, I mean, I'll let him speak for himself, but I feel like his strong suit is really he's very curious about the inner workings of certain programs, and he's very thoughtful in the way he's put his own program together. So he's been a wonderful collaborator in that respect. I think we balance ourselves really well there. So,
go on, Brock, I'll let you elaborate on that.
Yeah. Personally, I just am so fascinated by how, you put together a pedigree. How certain animals, I started noticing through time that there are certain bulls, if they were in the top and the bottom of the pedigree, that those animals really struck home for me as far as what I thought was an animal that I want to see in my program. So then it became a process of how do I kind of find all those bulls that are the bulls that really stack well together, and then how do I stack them in a way that maybe the conventional timeline wouldn't have allowed, where they could complement each other. And for me, that's been a lot of fun, and also an exhausting process, because for me to AI 100 head of cows, I think I probably put in at least 300 hours worth of work, and flushing's an even bigger problem, because I'll start with a list of 30 bulls for one cow, and then I have to feather that down to about 5. So
the history is in the pedigree, isn't it? Very much so. We look at phenotype, and we look at data, we look at all the rest of the things that are recorded, at the performance and what have you. But when you look at that pedigree, as you said, it's a minefield, because each animal carries its own merit, and it's about understanding what clicks with what down the way, and it's a game of chance as well, bro.
100%, because there's sometimes that I really think, oh man, I'm going to knock it out of the park on that one, and then there's sometimes you grab the wrong straw semen, and then you're trapped because you got to put it in that cow, and then it turns out that's a total home run, and it's something that you would have never put together. And that's happened several times by accident, and so then it's almost like but at the same time, I also don't believe in accidents, and so I feel like that was maybe I was supposed to find that.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you talk about the history and pedigrees. When I look at a pedigree, I probably see a little different picture than most, in that I look not only at just names on paper, but I'm also looking at breeders. I'm seeing geography and relationships within those pedigrees as well. So that's what I think is fascinating. There's so much more information if you really dig into it than what first comes to mind when you start looking at those pedigrees.
And of course, technology has helped us with all that as well. You can get a database now on your phone, wherever you are, bang, hit the button and get that pedigree and get the data behind it as well. And you talked about geography, which is again a fascinating subject within not just the Angus breed, but within all breeds. And my good friend PJ Butler, who's judged cattle all over the world, and you judge different animals in different places. But I mean, America is a very diverse country. I mean, I'm in Scotland and England, and okay, there's 500 miles between the north of Scotland and the south of England, and the weather does change a little bit, but you guys from the east to the west, to the south to the north, is different climates, different type of cattle, and you've got to take that into account, isn't it?
Yeah. And for me, it's always trying to stack cattle that had breeders behind them that had the exact same principles and philosophies.
Yeah.
And it seems like if you can do that those cattle are going to work better together, and that you're not creating such a fire and ice kind of deal.
Sure. And genetics in people as well is another thing that we all look at. Is the great breeders. It's funny that their children are great breeders and their grandchildren are great breeders. I think that's something genetic as well that comes down through generations with people as well. So you're right that when you see a family name on something, then it comes with a stamp of quality because it's got experience behind it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's fascinating. Again, when you focus on geography and some of those things that are locked in that pedigree, it was sometime this summer. I think I was driving home from somewhere down in Illinois, and I drove by a place and I saw a sign there, and I was like, oh, I know that name. It was Sangamon County, and I knew I'd heard that name from somewhere. And then I got a little further and I saw Pleasant Plains, Illinois, and it clicked. Emulus of Sangamon was the progenitor of the Emulus line, and in Angus cattle, and that would have got its start rooted at J. Garrett Tolan's.
So I said,
And then,
oh hell,
yeah, and he would have sourced those cattle, the emulous of Sagamon come out of from St. Albans, and when you start thinking about, okay, this was 40s, 50s. How did they transport those cattle? They don't move very far. Those animals geographically were not from far apart, and then to think that Carlton Corbin would have swooped in and bought that bull and built his program around him in Oklahoma.
Sure. And let's just talk about the environment that we're in. We're just sitting in now in the International Hall. I'm the international visitors, you guys aren't, but we sneaked in here because it very kindly led us a corner of the room there to have a chat with. But the whole show here in Denver, my first time, as I said, what an absolute buzz about it. And it's huge, and they've changed it now since you last came here as well. The whole show has been rebranded and still in transition just now.
Yes, yeah. So the last time that I was here was 17 years ago, and this is first time for Brock as well. But since the last time, they've basically reconstructed the yards. Some of the old buildings that existed here before have been torn down, and they've put up new facilities here. So it's interesting in that aspect, but it's also interesting from the standpoint of when I was here last, it was a little bit of a different environment. COVID had certainly changed the show here at Denver. They had canceled the year of COVID, and then the Oklahoma Cattlemen's Classic has come in and in the same time frame has probably divided some of the following, or some of the cattle that would have diverted some of the cattle that would have traditionally been here when I was here last.
Interesting. I was talking to Kurt Schaff earlier on, and he said just that the Oklahoma show has come in, and when this show was down, picked up a little bit of that traction. And I thought, well, you've got two shows end to end here. You do the one show the one week and the next one the next week. But he said people making a choice, they do one or the other. They don't do both shows, which I found quite surprising.
Which when you really think about what it costs to put up a crew, and basically house a crew for a week. It makes sense that you don't want to do that 2 or 3 weeks back to back. So
in the olden days, and again, we've studied a lot of this, but they called it ride in the rail, where they'd set off in the spring and they'd spend the whole year in a rail car, and they'd just do every show in the country with a team of stock and a team of people and head off around there. And what fun that would have been.
Definitely. And that they probably would have been able to do it a lot cheaper. They would have slept in the barns and other things.
They slept in the cars, I think, in the rail cars themselves. Sure. They're fascinating times. We learn from history. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, the pair of you guys here, and you're here for another couple of days yet, I think, having a look around, and you've done a bit of shopping this morning as well. I've been in the trade fair.
Yeah, that was way bigger than I was anticipating it, and there's a lot of diversity up there and a lot of neat things and some things I've never even seen before. So it's been cool for me to kind of check some of that out, and you're seeing some folks that I hadn't seen in at least a decade up here. So it's been fun to get some exposure to them again and kind of see their program from a different lens that I maybe haven't touched base with them. So seeing them and how they've brought their deal forward has been cool too.
To me, it's been fascinating as well from my days going to all the agricultural shows in the UK, which fairly condensed. The agricultural shows in the UK now have gone much more public orientated. There's a nucleus of where the livestock is, a nucleus where the machinery is, and then the rest of it is sort of general public stuff. We're here. This is still very much an agricultural oriented show, and it's fast. I don't know how many acres of land this place covers, but I mean, we literally have to get on a golf buggy to get from the cattle building here to the other cattle building, which is the other end of there. So I mean, it's a huge thing, and I think they bring in the general public, but it is very much an agricultural oriented show.
And for America, I think it's a huge deal for us to get exposure to the public on what we do in agriculture and get a chance to be an advocate for what we do.
Yeah, indeed. And it's not just Angus. We're here, Angus, 2 or 3 days while we're all here because we have an interest in the Angus. But there's been Herefords. There's Herefords going on here as well. But I mean, these guys will go home, and there's a whole team, different cattle coming next week. The show runs on for 2.5 weeks or something, and it'll be as busy from the first day to the last, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, Andy, what's your favorite part of the show so far?
I love seeing the old building with the cattle being judged this morning, the old building, looking at it and thinking this building's been here a long time and it's probably not going to be here much longer because they built the new one just around the corner, which is not open. It was supposed to be open for this show and it's not quite been open. I love the nostalgia in there. And then probably my favourite part so far is we went for lunch in the old cattleman's building, the old cattleman's Stockman's Bar down the way, which has seen a lot of tales and a lot of history, and it was still great to be in there. You could almost feel the history oozing out of that place, and we're probably privileged to be the last ones in there because I think they probably will, well, they said they're going to close that one down after we've gone from here, so I've enjoyed doing that. But I enjoy meeting people as well, and it's been fantastic to chat to a few people just as we go along. Everybody speaks to everybody else, and I think that's always a brilliant thing to be in shows in the USA. Okay, well, we'll wrap that up from there because there's a Hereford sale going on and I'm supposed to be here selling a few of these Aberdeen Angus history books that I'm here for. And it's been a pleasure talking to you guys. And we were going to do something on the phone across the pond, but actually to be three of us here together has been just a great pleasure. And we'll probably have a few beers tonight.
Andy, can you tell us a little bit about where you're from and a little bit about your background?
Sure, a family farm originally in the middle of England, just kind of bang in the middle around a place called Worcestershire, just next to Herefordshire, just down near the Wales borders. And grandfather was an entrepreneur and was into all sorts of things, made a lot of money in chickens in his younger days. And by the time I got involved in the farm, we were running a lot of beef cattle, Frisian beef cattle, mainly all inside. And I couldn't get on with my father and my brother in the business, so I left the farm when I was 26 years old and went to windy my way on my own and earned my living as a cattle fitter for many years. And then I kind of got involved in we hadn't really got the products that you guys have got in the States with regards to the grooming products, so I came across to the States and started picking some of those products up and set up my own grooming supply business as well. So that's kind of where I got started.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about what cattle fitting's like in the UK.
I think it's much the same as it is here now. I think it's gone very professional, but going back in the day, I mean, literally was just spray a bit of coat dressing on, and the guys were still clipping with scissors when I first started the job. So it kind of all changed, and I suppose we're probably still a few years behind you when it comes to the glues and all that sort of things. But we major on hair as well, and it's definitely in Scotland now. It's all about getting hair, and you've got to have hair on them to take it off.
So aside from your podcast, you're a writer, correct?
Yeah, I've written 45 books now, essentially.
Sure thing.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, on the train ride out, I was reading one of your books, Cash Cow, the Jack Dick story.
You're the guy that bought that book, then, eh? Jack Dick was a fantastic, very interesting character, a guy that had been, well, you'll know if you've read the book, but it was on the stock market as a trader and did a few underhand deals and got struck off the stock market for insider trading, and had a hankering to be, he's a New York City guy, and he had a hankering to be out in the country, and somehow or other he managed to gather money together and buy a farm and started buying a few Angus, and he didn't know much about the Angus, but he was a people guy, and he knew how to bring the right people in, and he started getting people buying into a scheme where they'd buy 4 or 5 cows and a bull, and then he'd keep those and look after them and charge them for looking after them. During a time when tax rates were right through the roof, the high-end taxpayers were paying 90% tax, and because they could launder that, if that's the right word, through agriculture, and then just get away with 8% tax on their profits. So Jack sort of seized that opportunity and just took it to stratospheric proportions, and ended up having 60,000 head of Angus all across the states, I think in 30 different states, and people looking after them, and the guys putting the money in there, and then people started getting jittery and wanting the money out, and suddenly realised that he hadn't got 60,000 head of Angus at all. He'd probably got about a third of that amount, and people started getting jittery and wanting the money out, and chasing Jack round about the place, and the creditors chasing him as well, and Jack somehow managed to sell the entire business for $30 million, and I think when the guys went to look at the books, it was probably worth about $3 million, but by that time Jack had done a runner and gone into art dealing. He was just an incredible guy, and he made a lot of money, and he took a lot of money off a lot of people. He was kind of the first Ponzi scheme, really. That's probably what he'd be remembered for most, is by running a Ponzi scheme in Angus cattle, there's been a few people who have done it, to be fair, but he did it just spectacularly.
My favorite Jack Dick story was the story of how he and Black Watch Farms bought the Lodge of Wye bull. They paid $250,000 for 2/3 interest and full possession of him, and my understanding was that after the fact, Wye got him back. So
that wouldn't surprise me at all. He'd done plenty of those deals over the days, but he knew how to go to the right people, and he knew the people that knew the people. You know what I mean? He was a good salesman too. A good salesman. Yeah, and Cash Cow's been a successful book. Anybody out there's in the film business, really looking forward to getting that into a film. I think it'd make a fantastic movie. That all those Angus cattle out there in the prairie and a shyster guy as a central character. I think I'd like to play the guy myself in the movie, but I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure I'm fit for that one.
Had to work on your American accent.
I will do.
550 online, got to be 5.5, 5 and a sold it to you. 525 on it.
That's why the Angus is now the number one breed in the world, and you can see that here at the stock show as well. I mean, the interest around Angus is second to nothing.
Changing gears here, this is your first National Western Stock Show. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's great. I arrived here in the beautiful sunshine. I thought, wow, I've come from Scotland there to sunny Denver, but that all kind of changed yesterday afternoon when the snow came down, and we've had 2 or 3 inches of snow down here now, and it's, as you said yourself, it's a bit more like Denver now. We've got a bit of snow on the ground, but it's maybe a bit of a challenge for a few people coming in and out, but no, it's a fantastic show, and I can't believe the size of it. I know you guys in the States, everything's big, but the size of this show is just like nothing I've ever seen.
I thought it was interesting, some of the comments that you made when we were sitting there together watching the ROV Bull Show on the hill. What were some of the differences that you see between the cattle here and the cattle at home?
The cattle here have come down in size quite a bit compared to where we are in the UK, but then I think we're seeing a change maybe in the UK as well, coming down to easier fleshed cattle. Some of the bulls there still wouldn't work for us in the UK. They probably wouldn't be big enough, but I mean, they'll still weigh, but I still struggle to see the large guts that they have on the cattle and the high tail head, which seems to be a fashion in the show ring just now, and that's something that doesn't look right to me. But then I'm seeing cattle from a different angle. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying it's different to what I'm used to seeing. So the cattle are definitely different, but certainly really well turned out and great structure on them, and good breeding stock and a great representation of what you've got here in the US.
Tell us a little bit about what you saw in the yards and the pen show.
The pen show were a different type of cattle. They're more the commercial type of cattle, and that's what the pen show is. The pen show and the carloads is about seeing the bulls from the commercial breeders, and there's some exceptional young bulls in amongst those, and females as well. A different type of cattle. The tailhead's a little bit better set in, and the animals may be a little bit lighter and not quite so heavily fed. I think you're seeing more of the commercial side of it, which is great because you're getting to see two different sides of the same animal, really. And the pen show really is where the commercial man should be looking at.
Yeah, I think that's always been a sure thing. Did you get a good chance to visit with Tom Burke today?
Yes, I spent quite a bit of time with Tom today and yesterday, actually. And Tom's a legendary man, as we've probably said before. But yeah, Tom has an encyclopedic knowledge, not just of livestock, of Angus especially, but of people. Tom knows everybody, and he remembers everybody by name, and he's a world famous and a well recognised guy within the Angus industry. And it's been an absolute honour, this book that I've been writing, to work with him and Dr. Bob Hope, and for the three of us to be here together this time was a real pleasure for me, and I'm glad I made that trip. But absolutely honoured to be involved with a guy like Tom Burke.
Yeah, getting to visit with all three of you guys in one place has been an absolute treasure here. We've got pictures today of Brock and I with all three of you guys, and that's something I think we'll treasure for a long time. Not to mention, we picked up our copies of the history of Aberdeen Angus in the US, UK, and worldwide.
Yeah, and it's been great that we have been able to sign some of those, and they'll be treasured pieces. I think we go whatever many books we've sold here, 20 or 30 books that we've sold here with the 3 signatures on there. Those will be a collector's piece. I'm hoping I've managed to keep one left for myself because Tom's gone home now to be able to have those signatures in there, because who knows when we'll all be together again.
The history behind stockyards in general. We probably talked more about the Chicago stockyards, but there's a ton of history here beyond a cattle show, and I find all that fascinating. I mean, you have the livestock or the
stadium. Yeah, you're right. There is a history, and that's going to come down. Everything moves on in life. You can't, as much as we'd like to preserve this history, we've got to take it and enjoy it, and remember it, and make sure that it's written down for future generations to see. Because this time next year, all that stadium area up there will be gone, or the arena area will be gone, or certainly disused now, and they're building a new one right next door here, much more functional, and imagine much more high tech and warmer as well, probably, and all the cattle will be in one place. So we can't just say that we have to stick with this history. But it's nice to be here and experience that. And I didn't get to see the old stockyards before they were knocked down, but I'd imagine the atmosphere and the history in those was wonderful. But it's still nice to be here on that site where they were.
it is very different from the last time I was here, which was 17 years ago. But it is nice being back here, and it will be an entirely different show next year. It'll be a whole different environment. I'm sure of that.
Where we are just now, we're near the sail ring, and again, the sail ring in here, the atmosphere in there, we've developed a beautiful sail ring in here, very functional, warm and tidy and well organised, and I think that's the future. That's the one here for the next 50 years to see, and there's sales going on pretty much all day, every day. Different types, different breeds, and different cattle, and different people come into those as well. So we're seeing a diversity of people coming in and out. We're wearing lots of different hats from different breeds, but they're all cattlemen at the end of the day.
Well, with that, I think we'll sign off here. Thank you, Andy, for letting us visit with you for the last few days. Hopefully, we haven't monopolized your time here. But,
it's been wonderfully likewise to see you guys as well. And just let's remind my listeners where they can get in touch with your podcast, Angus One Promotions. And you run that through a Facebook page, is that right?
So you can find us anywhere that you get podcasts. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Pandora, basically anywhere that you can find a podcast, we're probably there, represented there fairly well. You can find us on Facebook at Angus One Promotions.
Or you can reach out to us personally, or for Brock Boyle or Heath McPherson, and we'd love to hear from you too.
And likewise for myself, Andy Fraser, we do get people come to us, but I mean, obviously, more of our audience is European based and Australia's as well. But we do have a listenership over here, and it'd be nice to grow that. So it's good that we guys can work together and get you guys a few listeners on our side of the pond, and likewise, if people would like to hear my dreadful fast speaking, half Scottish, half English, bastardized voice that I have there, that hopefully people can understand. So it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Andy.
So that's from Heath and Brock at Angus One Promotions, and from Andy Fraser at Top Lines and Tails, the very first simultaneous multi-broadcast across two podcasts there at the same time. So hope you guys, people out there who haven't been to the Northwestern Livestock Show, can get here in another year and enjoy it, and hope you've enjoyed listening to us today.
Thank you for your time. Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you all for listening to this week's episode of Top Lines and Tails, and I'm home now there with a slightly streaming cold, so my apologies. And of course, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Harbro, who are great support to Top Lines and Tails there, and it's brilliant to work with them, and you know all about Harbro there and what they can do for your business. So thanks to Harbro, and thanks to all of you for listening in there on both sides of the Atlantic.